Okay, now we're recording. Perfect. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this day number 3 of this Gardening Ed Week 2024. I'm Christian Acosta, agriculture educator from Cornell Cooperative Extension, and I'm happy here today. So let's gonna be talking about controlling pests in the garden. So this week we have been talking about soil care and composting, seeds and plant propagation. Today talking about pests in the garden. And tomorrow we're gonna have houseplants, and Friday, how to produce our own herbs at home. So let's start. And if you have any questions, feel free to unmute your microphone. And that's it. So if not, in the chat, you can be sending your questions. So let's start with this class. So, oh, sorry, it's the wrong link. It's this one. Okay, now not talking about soil again. Okay, so we're gonna be talking controlling pests in the garden. Why is that important? Because, well, unfortunately, it's not that easy just to put some seeds in the soil, waiting for the plants to germinate and grow, and that would be like the perfect environment, right? If nothing touches our plants and we can harvest everything, tomatoes or whatever we are growing, and that's it. But we are not the only ones going after food or some beautiful flowers or any decorative plant, any ornamental plant. So there are many organisms. They can be tiny, like even we cannot see them, like microorganisms, and big organisms eating our plants, right? So this is when it's not that fun. This is when we are like, how to get rid of this animal or this bacteria, this fungi, etc. So these ones they are considered pests, and in general we have a disease because of the pest, what they are doing in the plant, or only in the presence of the organism eating or affecting our plants. So without a control, so we can have a loss of damage in our crops, in our plants. Even without pest control, sometimes 100% of the crop can be dead or totally destroyed. So this is why we need to be focusing and learning about how to control these ones. And because of course we don't want to waste our time and effort growing some plants and then some animal or some microorganism is killing our plants or reducing the quality of our harvest, right? So some common garden pests in New York State that we have, because of course we have thousands, probably millions of insects and microorganisms around the world. But focusing more here in New York State, we have these ones, the common ones like the Japanese beetles, these ones. When you are an entomologist and studying the insects, so they are beautiful, but they are very destructive. So they are not that beautiful when you have those ones in your garden. We have the aphids, we have some stink bugs, some mites. Well, with the mites, these here they look big, right? But look, this is just the edge of the border, the edge of the leaf. So with these ones, when you need probably a magnifying glass, you have white flies and caterpillars. You also have some earwigs. This year, probably you have noticed that we have more earwigs than before that. Um, Previous years. So also in the damage by earwigs, it also looks similar by the damage by slugs. So if you have something like that in your garden, so that isn't you're not the only one. So we have earwigs more and more this year, and it's about um, environmental like the temperature, humidity, and having this fluctuation in between different um, I forgot like the not tornado, the hurricane, and different environmental factors that they allow the temperature, the humidity, and everything, like the perfect environment for them to keep propagating. Also, oh, I have something here in the chat. Yeah, lanternflies, they also have been in the news, so they are spraying all around. So we have here in Allegany County, we don't have reports yet, so we just need to be on the look for those ones because, yeah, they are getting like out of control. It's hard to control the lanternfly. There are a lot of research about that. So we're gonna be talking about some of these methods to control, and some of them it's just like on the spot, but then it's so easy to propagate and for them to reproduce, and it's challenging. So far here we are safe, still safe, but we need to keep an eye on the gardens and make sure that they are not coming here. And if you see any, even just one, report that one because it's important to have the reports so we can be ready or trying to use some of these methods for prevention. And it's just prevention because so far a lot of research, and so probably in the next couple of years, we can have something more effective to be controlling these ones and keeping the populations very low. So yeah, keep an eye on the lanternfly. And it's not only about pests, right? About animals eating our plants. So it's also diseases because the organisms, they can be tiny. So microorganisms. So time ago, the pest and diseases, it was just like two different things. And now it's just pest control. So pest is, it can be an insect, it can be a bacteria, fungi, or anything that is alive and it's affecting your plants. A virus and a nematode that is like a tiny microscopic worm, and anything that is affecting your plants. So that is a pest. And for diseases, we have some of the popular ones here for New York State, like the angular leaf spot, the anthracnose in some of the fruits, especially cucurbits, like the melon, watermelon, the downy mildew, mostly for most of the zucchinis and many cucurbits, the powdery mildew, and in general, both powdery and downy mildew, some of the fusarium wilt, and brown spot. And also we have Phytophthora blight. So this is something that we also have locally in Allegany County. We have some reports for late blight. So this is the name of the microorganism, Phytophthora. Phytophthora infestans is the name. And so be careful with this one because it's one of the most destructive diseases out there. It's not, I was going to say fungi or fungus, but it's not really fungus. It's just like a different microorganism. So it's hard to control that one. Of course, we have more diseases than these ones. These ones are the popular ones, but we have more than that. We can have any other disease, and this is why it's important to be talking and learning about that. You don't need to be an expert, even there are people that they have been working 10, 20 more years studying diseases, and sometimes even they cannot identify easily a disease. So don't worry if you feel like, oh, this looks like some cotton or something like that growing on my plant, and I don't know what is it. So we can help to focus like what to try to identify, because the only way that we can be 100% sure that we have blight or we have some disease is with the laboratory testing. So when we are talking about pests and diseases, we also talk and learn about IPM. So this is for integrated pest management, and this is just using some information and reading about and learning about the pest and before acting, before taking action, and focusing on how the pest is reproducing or propagating, spreading around, and learning about that before just going to spray something. Because without IPM, you're just someone that, oh, there is an insect, no idea what insect it is, but it's in my plants. So go and buy a bunch of a mix, sometimes a cocktail of pesticides. It can be fungicides, bactericides, insecticides, and mixing all that and spraying on the plants, soaking wet, so they look like white, the plants. It can be the dust, or it can be just a mix that the plants is like they are, it's raining milk or something like that, soaking in milk, but it's not really milk. It's just a dangerous cocktail, very toxic, with pesticides. So this is not exactly very effective, and also it's expensive. So that's why we prefer to study and see if it's really necessary to be controlling an insect, because sometimes we can have, for example, a Japanese beetle that we know that is a pest, we know that is destructive, but sometimes they are just landing and then going away, and they don't really stay in your garden. Sometimes they stay and they keep reproducing, and then, okay, in that moment, that is a pest. So with a combination of techniques, we start creating our own plan, or the control method, the plan, the action plan for our garden, because it's not the same, the garden, my garden, than your garden, the garden, the neighbors, and even in a greenhouse or large production, it's way different how to we control pests and diseases. So, IPM, it can be one one class only talking about that, and it can be even a full semester at college. So here we are just going to mention the main four steps, and just basically the summary about IPM, and something that you can use for your garden, and how to control the pest in your garden using IPM. So it's how to do it properly, wisely. So this is basically just four steps. That is identification for the pest, prevention, or some we can be playing in between number one and number two, just moving probably first prevention, then identification, and then monitoring, and last step is control. So as we can see, control is the last step. Um, that's the difference when it's just like, oh, I have this insect in my garden. I need to go and buy an insecticide and start spraying anything, even if it's organic or synthetic. So first with the identification, um, so okay, we can start, like I mentioned before, we can start with prevention or identification. So if you don't have any insects, nothing in your garden yet, but probably at this point you have a lot of insects out there, good ones and not good ones. Um, but when you just start the gardening season, so probably there are no insects yet. So in that case, you start with the prevention. So let's start with the prevention. So if there is nothing out there, so you want to prevent insects and diseases and all that later in the season. So in that case, you buy disease-resistant plants. So I mentioned this multiple times with the classes. Yesterday, I mentioned the same. When it's about disease-resistant plants, it doesn't mean that it's a GMO. It's not modified in a laboratory or something like that. When you see hybrid F1, usually that's in the name of the plant, and F1, so, or F2, so those are hybrids, and it's just something, a material, a plant material, that it was created not in a laboratory. It's just mixing, crossing the pollination, so one parent and the other parent, and mixing a cross pollination between both of them, and you have a new plant that they have a good It can be for disease resistant. Sometimes it's about the size of the fruit or the color of the fruits, etc. So for this purpose, disease resistant. You can see that in the label, the the seeds, or when you go to buy the plants, sometimes, not always, but sometimes you can see in the tag, you're reading, and then it's like, okay, it needs full sunlight, etc. And then you can see disease resistant. If it doesn't say disease resistant, probably it's not, or sometimes they don't include that information. So just to make sure that it's disease resistant, for example, if we have um, late blight around in the area. So in that case, if you want to grow any solanaceas like tomatoes, eggplants, potatoes, any peppers in general, any peppers, so they are susceptible to blight. So in that case, uh, you go for disease resistant. So how to know that? So nowadays, even Google or some AI information chat, it can tell you what specifically what varieties they are blight resistant. So in that case, you can get those seeds, or in the greenhouse, you can look for those plants. So it's natural, it's normal. And in that way, you are going to save a lot of time and money because you don't need to be controlling some pest, some disease, because sometimes it's sad. So I had a question a couple days ago, and someone just is losing their tomatoes because all of them, they have blight. So all it looks gray and just like dying the plants. And it's hard at that point when the blight is inside of the plant, there is not really a fungicide or anything that can save the plants. In that case, it's just remove those ones before they keep spraying on the peppers and the other solanaceas. So that's something that you can do when you get the disease-resistant plant. Also, the proper plant selection that even it can be a disease-resistant plant, but we are getting plants from Nicaragua, from Mexico, or from even here in the US, but from Florida, from Texas, for example. So they are adapted to different environment. So if we bring those plants here, probably the plants start growing, but it's cold, right? So it's usually cold, and even during the summer months, the temperature, the humidity, everything is different. So in that case, the plant is gonna be a little weak or stressed. And when the plants are stressed, they are susceptible to many insects, diseases. So in that case, also we can prevent in that way. Just get something local, something that is already adapted to these areas. If you get the plants, even the plants from local nurseries and local greenhouses, quarantine the plants before moving them to the garden. And I have one example right here. So I bought this, it's and this orchid, and it's beautiful. When I saw this one in the well, probably you cannot see because it's blurry in the background. So this one, it was beautiful, and yeah, I bought it, and it's healthy. It looks healthy. And initially, I didn't see anything. I was checking the plants, and okay, nothing. So okay, it's healthy, but sorry. Even when it's healthy and it looks healthy, no fungi, no diseases, not fungi, nothing, no insects flying around. I put this one here. It's far from the rest of the orchids. And couple days later, now probably you cannot see here on camera, but now they have some. Um, no, you can. No, it's hard. It's blurry. Everything is blurry. But now you see some white spots. And now I see that this orchid has some problem with mealybugs. So now I need to start treating that plant. But it's good that I was keeping that apart because now I need to be spraying something only for that plant, only for that orchid, and not for all of the orchids. Because if I were Normally I will be like, oh, it's like without any of this prevention, it will be like, okay, it's healthy, go with the other ones. And now I will, at this point, I will be suffering with tons of mealybugs on all of my orchids. So in that case, this is why it's nice to have that quarantine. So you can quarantine the plants, putting apart from the garden, far from the garden, or far from the other indoor plants for a couple days. This one, it was 1 week later, I started noticing the white spots. So in that case, you need to control only one plant, or sometimes if it's, for example, blight in one of your tomatoes that you bought somewhere. So in that case, you put that in the garbage or burn that one, and your garden is safe. Also, proper sanitation before touching the plants. So, for example, if I start touching this orchid and the mealybugs, usually we can see them when they are already with the coating all white. But other than that, the eggs, and in that case, will be before that white coating that they have, um, you cannot see them. So probably if I have some in my or some eggs in my hand, and then I go to touch the pest free orchids, so I can be propagating this insect. Or if it's a disease, so in that case also we can be spraying the disease. So before touching the plant, it's good to have proper sanitation. You can have disinfectant solution when you're working in the garden. For example, just a mix of 9 parts of water, 1 part of bleach, and that's simple. And just be careful with bleach with your clothing, especially. But a mix like that is nice to be to disinfect your hands and your, for example, the gardening knife if you're pruning. Uh, Something like that. You don't need to get the fancy or anything from the store. If you want to get like the clean grow, some of these disinfectant solution um, from the store, so okay, that's it. But if you don't have any of that, just 9 parts of water, 1 part of bleach, and that works. What about vinegar? I have heard like, yeah, vinegar is good because vinegar it kills any fungi and even the spores and everything. It helps to disinfect. But in that case, if you're mixing with a lot of water, so also it reduces the effect of the vinegar. But vinegar, when we're talking about gardening, vinegar is an herbicide. So be careful with that because, yeah, vinegar is very, really good to treat fungi, for example, even in humans or animals when you have um, any infection by fungi or fungus, just with vinegar mixed with water, cleaning the area like that, it helps um, to treat the area, but not with plants. With plants, we can kill our plants if we spray vinegar on them. So not that disinfecting solution when we're working in the garden. And also the tools, like I mentioned, the gardening knife and anything that you're using for pruning, for cutting, for the whole everything you disinfect um, before start working in the garden. So in that case, we prevent any diseases, especially diseases um, in your healthy plants on your health on your healthy plants and the application of organic insecticide fungicide, and here this is one example, and is the neem oil. So if you here we are missing the N here, so the neem oil is just one of the examples that is great. It is not like miracle that it works for everything, but almost. It works as a insecticide and fungicide. It's natural, it comes from a plant, and this extract, the oil, we can mix with water and spray on the plants. And something really nice is that, for example, tomorrow that we're talking about houseplants, one way to control the insects, even some diseases, or prevent some diseases for indoor plants is with neem oil because it's safe to use indoors. It's not like, for example, seven dust is very toxic and you cannot use it indoors. So many of these pesticides, especially insecticides, you cannot be using or spraying indoors. So with horticultural oil, neem oil, these organic products, you can be spraying indoors and it's safe for you, for the pest, it's not safe. For the pets, for the dogs, the cats, or any pet that you have at home, your kids, it's not toxic. It's only had some toxicity, but for the pests. For example, this one, the mealybugs, I can be treating with the neem oil. In that case, it's a little stinky. That's the only concern, but it's just for a couple hours and then the smell, it goes away. So that's something nice to be using an organic insecticide or fungicide. And in that case, it's just preventive before we can see any insect or any disease on the plants. And the crop rotation, so when we are out there in the garden. So again, like I mentioned, if about the solanaceas, if I'm growing tomatoes this year, and next year I think, okay, I'm gonna rotate that. And next year I'm planting potatoes or eggplants. So in that case, we are not really rotating the crop because it's a different crop, a different plant, but it's the same family. So in that case, they are susceptible to similar or even the same pathogens, the same insects, the same pests and diseases. So in that case, it's changing for something totally different. That if in this rice bed or in this area of the garden, I'm growing tomatoes this year, next year in that area, I'm growing probably beans or a squash or something different. And we can be rotating. That can be every 2 years. If you want to be rotating every year, okay, that's fine. Or every 2 years, every 3 years. The purpose with this is breaking the life cycle of the pests and diseases. So we don't allow them to be getting that resistant because they also can get resistant to pesticides, to what you normally apply, like even the neem oil at some point. So be careful with that. And then we can have identification, the second step, or sometimes it's the first step when you see something in the garden immediately. So we can start the IPM at that point. If nothing, we can start with the prevention. So identification. I saw something flying around my zucchinis or my tomatoes or some plant at home. So it doesn't mean that you have a problem and that you have a pest. In that case, we need to identify that first to know if even sometimes we have some damage in the plant and we see another insect because they are there probably because the plant is already damaged. So they are just like taking advantage of that. But they are not the ones causing, they are not the culprit, they are not the ones causing that damage. So that happens sometimes. And so this is why it's good to identify the culprit, who is doing that damage, or if this insect that I see on my plant is really a bad one or a good one. So that's why not every insect or wildlife, any animal around, is a pest. Is a pest, and not every spot on the plant. Like probably I can have my orchid, and I see or any plant, and I see a brown spot. It doesn't mean that immediately is a disease. So to be 100% sure, we have laboratory identification. And for the cooperative extension office that I mentioned here is you can send your an email with your pictures and tell us what is happening. This is happening in my plants. I think this is the insect, and we can help you to identify, or sometimes just by the damage and how it looks, we can, or just with the insect in there. So we can tell, okay, it's not 100% sure that, yeah, this is the insect, this is the correct, but we can tell, yeah, that looks like this disease, this pest, and you can be doing this and this and this and this, and some recommendation for that. So you can contact Cooperative Extension Office at any time. Feel free to send your pictures and anything at any time. And now with the development of artificial intelligence and a lot of apps and tools that we can have even now from just with the phone, we have some phone apps that they are so how to say this? So it's not like they are useless, but sometimes they are not that accurate. So it's not 100% accurate. So for example, with the phone app, if you take the picture of the Japanese beetle, so it's a big organism, it's a big beetle. So probably it's gonna be at least 90% accurate that yeah, Japanese beetle, you can do this and this, and even that provides recommendation. And also, well, something that this, because the AI is it just takes information from the internet or from any source on the internet, but it's not really intelligent, it's not really deductive, it doesn't have that ability to think. So sometimes it can be identifying a pest or a disease that is from China or from a different environment and not taking into consideration the place, the environment. I saw recently an app that it was asking also not only the picture, also was asking where is it located and how the watering and a couple of questions about that. So I think they are putting this into consideration, and this was a beta version. So probably in the future we can have better apps about this. But sometimes it's not 100% reliable to be trusting the apps because that happened. I was trying one day and I got, I forgot what was the disease. It was for a disease and it told me like something way different, completely different. It was like a virus. The diagnostic, the diagnosis, it was like a virus, but it wasn't a virus because I knew that it was a plant with a fungi, so with some fungus infestation in there, some alternaria, some different, way different. And it was telling me that I had a virus when it wasn't a virus. So be careful when using these apps. So just to make sure you can contact the cooperative extension office or send the sample to the laboratory, especially when it's production, right? Because in testing these sometimes it's a little pricey. And online browsing. So sometimes there are some pests and diseases that they are so easy just to Google it and that's it. No, just by the symptoms, everything looks pretty similar. So just with Google, sometimes you can be identifying the pest. For example, aphids. It's so easy. Even sometimes you don't need the Google. You can, oh, that's aphids because it's impossible to miss those ones. They are green or black ones and they are growing in there. Usually they don't fly. So that's how you can be identifying. And then prevention. So okay. If you find something, but okay, false alarm, not a pest, not a disease, it's not really anything to be concerned about. So you start using some prevention. So just in case, I'm gonna start spraying some neem oil, or horticultural oil, some insecticidal soap, something natural just to prevent some prevention. And then if you find something, okay, now I have aphids, now I have mealybugs, now I have Japanese beetles, now I have something that you already identified. So you keep an eye on them. It doesn't mean that you need to spray it right there immediately. Um, because we have something that for insects, not for diseases, for insects, we have the action threshold. So you can Google that. If you have, for example, aphids, you look for action threshold for aphids. Something is very specific if it's on tomato plants. So there are some research. This it has been for decades of research, and that's why today we are grateful of all of those scientists and all that information that is already posted, published about the action thresholds for many, many pests. So you can find that sometimes it's not that easy. Sometimes it's not that easy to find. It's not the first thing that pops in Google or any book or something talking about pest control. But it's nice if you can find that one because this is what is gonna tell us if we need to be concerned and go to buy the pesticide or not. If we can save the money and time and effort and not exposing ourselves to that to pesticides, for example. So with this one, we have some information that, for example, for Japanese beetles, one individual per plant. So, okay, they are highly destructive that even one individual per plant you need to be controlling. So in that case, if you see one or two couple Japanese beetles around your garden, you need to take action. That's why it's called the action threshold. You need to go and spray or be picking those ones and put it in a soapy solution to kill them. Some people they just by hand they smash those ones. Um, so if you find that gross, so you can use the soapy water or spraying something. So in that case, it's just one individual. But for example, for aphids, we can have about percentage. So if 20% of the plant is it has aphids, so we are not counting one by one. It's just if 20, 30, 50% of the plant is already it has the infestation there with the aphids, so we need to be spraying something. Because if it's just one or two or three aphids in your tomatoes, in your peppers, in your beans, on your beans, plants, or etc., you can just wait for the rain. When it's raining, it flushes the aphids. So they are not constantly flying or jumping. You can see that they are very slow. They are not fast animals, insects. So in that case, sometimes just raining, the rain, it helps to control aphids. So this is why it's nice to be learning about that and to know if it's just couple this season. So far in my tomato plants, I had just probably 3 to 5 aphids per plant, and they are not growing. They are not reproducing a lot. It's not really representing a threat. It's not really a pest for my tomatoes this year. So I'm not doing anything about that, and it's normal. And with the rain, I can see that the population they go low. So if they are 5 or 6, now I have one, probably one after the rain. Um, so in that case, for that is that this is one example. The action threshold for aphids in tomato ranges from 50% or more of the leaves. So that's why I'm not concerned about having aphids in my tomatoes this year on my tomatoes. Um, so I don't need to be spraying anything. And this is something nice because you are saving time and money when you see that you don't need to be taking action about that. If I would like to have something about aphids, something like mixing a soapy water, soap without bleach. So be careful about the soap that you are mixing with the water and spraying on the plants. So just some soapy water and a couple drops of the soap in a gallon of water and spraying on the plants. That if I wanted to do something about that, but I know they are not really a pest on my plants this year. So based on this, you can make the decision if it's necessary to apply a product. Now about product, when you identify the pest, you know that you need to do something about the action threshold. uh, Now you can start thinking what product to buy or what product to be spraying. In that case, it's nice to know if we are treating a fungi infestation, if we have bacteria, or if we have an insect, or if we have a nematode. Nematodes, they are like microscopic worms that they are feeding from the roots of the plant. Usually they are underground. In that case, so the only ones that we can just by eye identify is the insects. And sometimes the diseases just by the symptoms and the signs and the symptoms that they show. But for bacteria, well, sometimes also the symptoms. Nematodes is something that you need to test your soil, or because the symptoms. So the roots they start getting like different, like knots. They get like knots, and just by the symptoms. So I'm not gonna go deep into this. You don't need to be the expert, but even if you want to contact the cooperative extension, or you know that okay, that can be a fungus, it can be a bacteria or an insect, you go and buy specifically if it's an insect, any insect, so you buy an insecticide. If it's about diseases, so you have some mildew or some this is an example of the disease, a mildew, for example, you get a fungicide. If it's about bacteria, like, okay, the laboratory or the professional is telling you that can be a bacteria infection. So in that case, you buy bactericide. These are not that common with plants, but sometimes it's mostly with plants. We have mostly fungus and insects, and also nematodes. So in that case, a nematicide. This is gonna save you a lot of money because that also one day I was hired just particularly a grower, and he was growing some beautiful flowers. He thought that he had um I forget the name of the disease, but that he had disease. And then I was like, okay, I can go and check the plants. And we were looking at the plants. He was spending lots of money in fungicide. And he's like, it's not working. Like, tell me the name of something stronger. Like, I need something stronger to get rid of that fungus. And then when I was pulling the plant, and yeah, it was something white, like cotton, in the around the roots. So when it's something like cotton, that's why probably he thought it was fungi fungi. And then in that case, I was just paying attention, taking with a magnifying glass, and I see that fungus walking, like moving. So in that case, okay, they don't move that fast, right? So in that case, it was not a microorganism, it wasn't a fungus infection, it was an insect actually living there around the roots and creating that coating similar like the mealybugs, and that's why they were walking. So in that case, he needed an insecticide, not a fungicide, and he was wasting money, and it was a big production, a large production. So losing a lot of money with the wrong treatment. So once he started with insecticide, that was finally the right control method for that. Oops, what's going on? Okay, so that's why it's really important to be monitoring and to identify the culprit. Um, and then when you know that it's time to take action, so you go to the final step that is control. So now finally we can start controlling our pests. And how we can be doing that? So if you want just to keep them away, so you can use some repellents, because sometimes it's not nice to be killing all of them. For example, if you have wildlife, you have deer, you have skunks, you have bolts, you have some of these animals, you can like some people can shoot them, or some people can be putting some traps like for the small rodents. But then if you have tons of them, so in that case, it's better to look for something different. It can be a repellent, for example, like some garlic with very spicy, and even the fish. Now there are some products with fish in it, and it's really stinks, or rotten eggs. And well, in that case, if you can tolerate that smell, I wouldn't personally to have that 100% in the garden smelling that bad. Um, so okay, go for it, and using some repellents for that purpose, just to keep them away. Just the plants are not really attractive for them. Also, the crop rotation. So I'm jumping here to fence off for the bigger animals. That is way more effective, but it's a little pricey sometimes, right? If you want to put a fence around your garden. And for some of the rodents, something is that they can also be digging and go into your garden. So it's not that simple to be controlling pests all the time. So it's when you have the patience and you try one and another thing and keep trying what is the best for your particular case. Because sometimes something that works for your neighbor and even there being that close is not working for you. And something that works for you sometimes is not working for your neighbor or for someone when you give that advice. For insects and diseases, you can practice the crop rotation, like I mentioned before. Um, the tillage, so you can use the tillage and mulching, so it can be pulling, removing the weeds, because sometimes the weeds they can become in a hot spot for diseases. So sometimes you can see that the weeds are sick, they are getting the disease, and then this can be like that spot for the spores um, of that disease, that microorganism, to be all that the fungi spores going around and then going to your plants. So that's why better just to be removing the weeds and hoeing, so removing those weeds. And also because sometimes the weeds they are not affected by the microorganisms, but they can retain water and moisture in there. So that's the perfect environment for most of the fungi to be growing. And also trapping, so you can be using something sticky like that. Usually the color is yellow, so it mimics the color of the flowers. So many insects they go and boop, they get stick in there. You can use that indoors or outdoors. Some traps that you can buy from the store, or you can make your own traps, usually with something like vinegar, like apple cider vinegar and water, or the yeast and sugar, so they can go looking for that and then they get trapped inside. And something that you can prevent, so something that you can do for diseases, it's the irrigation practice. What time are you watering usually? So try to water early in the morning or in the afternoon, late in the afternoon, but not at night or just right before night, before it gets dark. Because when it's dark and the humidity is high, dark, and some temperature, some nice temperature, cool temperatures, that's the moment when the spores, any spores, they can start growing on top of the plant and creating the disease. So those are some of the methods that you can use to control. And the last step, so just like the last step is going for the chemical control, like when it's the $7 or any pesticide that is chemical. In that case, always read the labels, always follow the instructions, and protect yourself, because those ones, you need to be really careful with those ones. Or you can also, especially insecticides, you can get poisoned by that. So be careful in that case. Some methods like the soil, you can before starting the gardening season, you can put a plastic on top of the garden and allow just 1, 2 or 2 weeks for solarize that, so it increases the temperature. Sometimes it can get really hot and it kills some of the pests, some, not 100%, but some of the spores and some of the insects that they may be in there on the soil, just waiting for your plants. When you're harvesting, planting and harvesting, so choose the best time to be planting and harvesting. If you plant, for example, if I start growing my tomatoes right now, they are we know that they are be growing and they can survive a couple months, but because it's gonna be cold soon, so they are gonna be weak and tons of diseases, so it's not really a good time. So timing is also nice method to be preventing some prevention for diseases and pests and diseases. The cover crops, you can also use cover crops so you don't allow the weeds to be growing around there. And they also help for the soil nutrition. So using some cover crops. Here are some examples for here, like oats, hairy vetch, etc. Some resistant varieties, like I mentioned before, allelopathy. So you can use, for example, we know that rosemary, it helps to repel some of just the smell, it helps to repel some of the insects around. You see that rosemary usually doesn't have any problems with pests or diseases or anything like that. The only thing with rosemary is it doesn't like to have a company around, so don't overcrowd your garden. So just if the rosemary is here, allow some space and then planting things around the rosemary. Um, just for that allelopathy, that effect, chemical effect that it has to repel insects and sometimes repel plants around it. Intercropping, so also we can have, if we know that we're going to be growing corn and we have some insect eating our corn every year there. So we can try a different variety or try a different plant that this insect, this beetle, for example, the larva of this beetle is going to eat the a different like we call this like a trap, a crop trap or trap crop, something that you're gonna grow only for the insects to be feeding there and living there and not touching the corn, for example. And we can use the biological control, that is using natural enemies. These can be insects. So just one example, this is an example, microscopic or almost microscopic, it's just too small, about Encarsia formosa, that is a little wasp, a little insect that is laying their eggs inside of the aphid's eggs. So in that case, one control the other ones. And this is something so nice. We can create a class only for biological control because this is a lot of information that we can be learning from biological control. Is in microorganisms, also for insecticides, like a natural insecticide, we have Boveria bassiana and the BT, for example. This is something nice, Bacillus thuringiensis, and it's commercially easy to get, BT. So this BT, it helps for mostly caterpillars or larvae, any larvas. So when you have some problems with caterpillars or larvas, you can spray the BT. It doesn't mean that when you spray, they die, because that bacteria you spray and it's there. So the larva, it needs to be eating that bacteria to create that poisoning effect and then die. So especially when you have, tomorrow I'm going to be talking more about that, when you have some fruit flies or fungus gnats um, in your plants, especially indoor plants, that's a problem. You can be using BT. There is BT israelensis, that is the strain that it helps a lot for that. So you need to be spraying every week for a couple of weeks until finally all the larvae, they are dead, because it doesn't affect the adults, only the larvae. And also we have some natural fungicide like trichoderma. So we can spray the trichoderma on the soil, usually it's the soil, and it helps. This strain eats many fungi. So it's a natural way to protect our plants. So we don't have much time for the video. Like I mentioned, this can be a very long class. So this is just one example that we have for natural control for aphids. Oh no, what I'm doing. For aphids, so for example, this is Aphidius herbi, and I'm gonna move it right here. This is the moment, the action. So the wasp, as you can see here, we have some aphids, and the wasp is literally going and laying the eggs inside of the aphid, and then that larva start feeding from the inside of the the aphid, and after a couple days, we can see something like that, something like this. So they are dead, and the new wasp, now it comes out. So the aphid becomes like in the new cocoon or the new egg, right? It's feeding from that, and then it goes out. So probably the creators of the Alien movie or something like that coming out of the body, probably they knew something about biological control because that's something that happens in the nature. And so this is just one of the examples what is happening out there. So sometimes nature can be really uh, in that case, it can be the aphids can experience like a gruesome death. So sometimes it's that wild in nature. So just naturally controlling the populations, the pest out there. Here we have, you can, well, I'm gonna post the recording of this session probably next week on the YouTube channel, or you can get right now just the screenshot of this biological control cheat sheet. And in that case, it's for example, if I have white flies, so we can use a parasite and we can use one of these ones. Especially for greenhouses, for if aphids, so these mostly in greenhouses or organic production, we can be using that. If not, no, because usually that's a little pricey, and you need to keep alive these guys too. So in that case, you need to take care now of two things. And the organic control, like I mentioned before, neem oil, horticultural oil, some garlic spray you can get now on the store. You can get many of these products also commercially, or just do it by yourself. When you do it by yourself, be careful about the mix, the concentrations, and everything. Um, and do not believe everything that you see on the internet, because that's how I also got a call at some point. Someone killed his zucchinis because this gentleman, he saw something on TikTok or YouTube or something online, and he sprayed the vinegar on top of the zucchinis or squash. I think it was zucchinis, and then the plants died. It turned brown and died. So be careful if you're using some home remedies. Try to look for research-based information, something um, reliable sources. The stinging needle spray, that's something nice. Also, even sometimes just having the stinging needle in the garden, you see that it helps to repel some of the pests around, and diseases, sometimes even diseases. The spicy mix for animals like the onion, cayenne pepper, garlic, jalapeno, and mixing all these dry or the solution and spraying around the garden. So we had some case studies here, but now I see that we are short in time. Um, so I think we don't have enough time to be studying this. Usually this for an hour and a half class or 2 hours. We take one of these studies and see what went wrong, like what happened, what was the case. In that case, for some, in that case, it was for poisoned, someone getting poisoned by insecticide. So this is when I mentioned, be careful if you're using anything synthetic from the store, anything insecticide, fungicide, even if it's not that toxic. Always be careful, always use the protective equipment, because some of the pesticides, they can absorb really fast through your skin, your eyes. And so be very careful when you're spraying something. So that's why we're learning about this. So in that case, the spraying the pesticide, the toxic ones, the synthetic ones, is the last step that we can be using. So 1 minute, we can. If you have any questions, feel free to unmute your microphone. If you have a question right now, we can use 1, 2 minutes for questions.
Yeah, Christian,
Yes.
what is the extension's attitude toward neonicotinoid systemic herbicides right now?
Yes. Sorry, again. For systemic herbicides, what is
Well,
the
particularly the ones that are called neonicotinoids, because they're the ones that, um, first of all, being an histemic, they can get into the crop, which they've done testing, and they think that if it gets into the crop, that they're trying to, well, they're starting to establish a connection between remnants of that and possibly autism spectrum issues in humans. The
Mm,
other thing, though, particularly would be that they, for example, if it's gotten into a plant and is consumed by a bird, I believe that there have been studies where things, for example, that the bird's eggs were extremely fragile, so now you're endangering the ability of the bird to reproduce, let alone any of the things like the pollinator issues. So are there, like, in other words, the CC is extension coming out and saying, we're staying away from these because of the dangers? I know they've been trying to legislate for a long time, but they don't seem to be able to get anything through as a rule.
yeah. Okay. Yes, for these ones, it's the concern because yeah, you mentioned the last part about pollinators. So there are some studies that also shows that these ones they affect the bees. They also affect pollinators. They also affect the good ones. And of course, all the life around. So that can also affect us. Sometimes we cannot feel the effects, and not only for these ones, for many insecticides, herbicides, for example, the Roundup, when using it for, one sec, gonna mute you a little bit there because I hear myself. And using it for many years, then we can see a reproductive harm. So in that case, some of the cases with cancer, with the next generation, some of the kids from the applicator. So now malformations and having these for being exposed to the chemicals for many years. So that's why I mentioned try always to use the chemical control like the last method, the last step. And Google it before even going to buy or applying. And ideally before buying the product, so because sometimes that's expensive. If the product that you're going to apply, because we can have many products, I cannot be talking specifically about one product or another one. They are constantly bringing many things to the market. Um, so in that case, Google it first if the ingredients they have some of these chemical components, these chemical compounds. And in that case, yeah, it's better do not apply any of that. On just keep that far from your garden, far from you, from your pets, etc. And about sorry, I about the legislation and about CCE working for this one. So we can start getting some spraying the voice and start running some classes to explain how this works, etc. By request. So right now, for example, here in Allegany County, I'm not running any informational activity or program about that. But by request, we can start, yeah, of course, creating the educational material to give to people, and definitely is something that we get the emails and there are some people working about that, but like you mentioned, it's hard when the legislation, when the rules, it's not like mandatory or not is no, we don't have more um, like support for in a legal way to be spraying and talking more about that. Okay, so any more questions? Sorry, I got now we are 11:07. So I think if we have more questions, feel free to this is my email and our office number, phone number. Feel free to reach out anytime, any moment, that we are always happy to help. So Thank you for being here. I'm gonna stop the recording, and I'll see you in the next class. So for tomorrow or any future event that we are always doing. Thank you so much for being here. Have a wonderful day.